Hello, this is Mimi. I'm talking to you from Tisha B'Av. I wanted to add a few things from the last time we talked just earlier today. I wanted to talk to you about the importance that Tisha B'Av played today in Israel, the state of Israel. So for everybody who was watching the events today in Israel, they were waiting to get attacked. Israel was waiting to get attacked on this date from Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, and they had particularly said that they were going to use this date, Tisha B'Av, because they know it's a tragic date in Israel history, in the history of Israel, because a lot of bad things happened tragically to the people of Israel, the Jewish people. The two biggest being that the first temple and the second temple, both on this date, got destroyed on the 9th of Av. Tisha 9 Av, the month, the 9th of Av. Also, the Jewish people were told to leave Spain with the Alhambra decree in 1492. And by July 31st, they had to get out, which coincidentally, a few days later, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So I don't think that was a coincidence, but that's not what this is about. And I talk about Christopher Columbus in my earlier Tisha B'Av podcast. So if you want to hear about Christopher Columbus and his connection with the Jewish people and America, then you can listen to that. But anyway, let's get back to Tisha B'Av. It's a tragic day for Jewish people, and so Iran, thinking they had the upper hand with Hezbollah and Hamas, were going to use this date. Last week they said, "Oh, there's Tisha B'Av's coming up. We're gonna, make war against Israel on this date, just to add to their misery." So there was a lot of trepidation and a lot of anxiety in Israel. Well, this date has come and this date has gone, and Tisha B'Av is finished, and there was no war. So I just want to thank the God of Israel. He lo yanum v'lo yashan, shomer Yisrael, he who keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And I just wanted to say that there were a bunch of religious people, religious Jews who stood on the mount, the Temple Mount today. I've already talked about that. They said maybe 3,000, maybe less, I don't know. But it was more than ever had been on the Temple Mount, praying to God, shouting out to God. I believe as intercessors and shouting out to God that they want their, that they miss their temple. They miss their God. And, the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, was their holiest site. It was the place that Abraham sacrificed Isaac, the place where Jesus got sacrificed. And, it's a very holy place. And the presence of the Lord was there. And so I believe that these religious Jewish people who were on the Temple Mount today more than ever, because Jewish people aren't allowed to pray on their own Temple Mount. I know that sounds crazy, but in 1967, after the Six-Day War, when they got the Temple Mount in East Jerusalem back in the West Bank, or the Judea and Samaria, I'm going to call it, they were a little bit afraid about the Arab nations, what would happen, and because they captured the Temple Mount, because the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock was up there, and they also were afraid to step on the Holy of Holies. They didn't know where that was, so they kind of gave back the Temple Mount to the Muslims, and the Jordanian, I think they're called the religious, the Waqf. I think it's WAQF, and let them be in charge that was the reasoning. And so they just said that the Muslims are the only ones who can come in the mosque, that the Jews can't pray up on the Temple Mount. But the religious and the Jewish people, after October 7th, with the Al-Aqsa flood, that's what it was called, the Al-Aqsa flood, after the mosque on the Temple Mount, that's the name of it, the name of the flood, came. And the flood came and obviously killed and maimed and destroyed a lot of people and a lot of hope for Israel. But at the same time today, on the most tragic day about the temple being destroyed on the Temple Mount, like 3,000 came. A lot of people came to pray, which was the most ever since the destruction of the temple in 70 AD by Rome, by Titus. So that's pretty interesting. And the reason why I bring up the 3,000 religious people, or just Israelis, who came to the Temple Mount today to pray to God, which was against the rules, I opened today my Bible, and I got Esther 9. Now that was totally a coincidence to me. I say coincidence, but there is no coincidence if, with the Lord. But when I looked down, it's all about Purim, and Purim is all about a genocide coming against the Jews by Persia, which is Iran right now, and how the Jews actually, when the genocide, they try to commit genocide on the Jewish people, it actually twisted and turned around for the Jewish people, victory for the Jews. And this is what it says, Esther 9. It says, "So on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the 2 decrees of the king were put into effect. One decree was that Haman was going to get his wish, which was to kill the Jews on a certain date. The second decree was Esther going before the king, pleading for her people that they could defend themselves. And so the 2 decrees of the king were put into effect." Chapter 9, verse 1 of Esther. "On that day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but quite the opposite happened. It was the Jews who overpowered their enemies. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the king's provinces to attack anyone who tried to harm them, but no one could make a stand against them, for everyone was afraid of them. And all the nobles of the princes, the highest officers, the governors, and the royal officials helped the Jews for fear of Mordecai. For Mordecai had been promoted in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces as he became more and more powerful. So the Jews went ahead on the appointed day and struck down their enemies with the sword. They killed and annihilated their enemies and did as they pleased with those who hated them." Now you might say, well, who? For those of you who don't know who Mordecai is, Queen Esther the story is Queen Esther was a Jewish gal, probably a very beautiful Jewish gal, who the king was looking for a new queen because the queen Vashti had disobeyed him, and so he looked for a new queen, and Esther found favor in his eyes. And so when her cousin or uncle, Mordecai, he's the one who raised her, he worked in the palace, and when Queen Esther got chosen as queen, he watched out for her. And then when Haman's decree went into effect to kill all the Jews, he went and told Esther she needed to go before the king and plead for her people's lives, which she did. And then after that, Mordecai got promoted in the king's palace. And it says he told everybody, because of the opposite effect, that they should celebrate this day. And it says they would commemorate at a time when the Jews gained relief from their enemies, when their sorrow was turned into gladness and their mourning into joy. And so I think Israel's probably sighing a breath of relief, a sigh of relief right now. that Tisha B'Av, a day of destruction, where they're always victimized, came and went. And I'm not saying that something's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's not happening on Tisha B'Av, the day of tragedy. And perhaps, and then it says, so the Jews accepted Mordecai's proposal to adopt this annual custom, and Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, had plotted to crush and destroy them on that particular date. In Esther, it was in March, but today, the Iranian Persian Haman tried to destroy them on their tragic day of Tisha B'Av. But when Esther came before the king, he issued a decree causing Haman's evil plot to backfire. This is verse 25 of Esther 9. Causing Haman's evil plot to backfire, and Haman and his sons were impaled on a sharpened pole that he had actually put in his front yard to destroy Mordecai on. And so I just think it's very interesting that they gained relief, which I think Israel is showing some relief. And at the end of the book of Esther, it says, he was very great, this is Mordecai, very great among the Jews who held him in high esteem because he continued to work for the good of his people and to speak up for the welfare of all their descendants. This is a famous story, and it seems like history is repeating itself. So I just want to thank everybody who have been Esthers out there today. I want to thank everybody who cared about the state of Israel. I want to thank people who are the queens, male or female, the bride of the king of Israel, the soon coming king again, and who went and pleaded for their people, your people, the Jewish people today, and for all those religious and the Jewish people, Israeli people who went to the Temple Mount praying on the Temple Mount, which was like I said, was more than ever since the reestablishment of the State of Israel in 1948. I just want to thank you and say it sounds like God has heard you. And God says, I will bless those who bless you, Abraham, and I will curse those who curse you. So remember, just want to remind people who read the Bible or in the church or hearing this for the first time that the Bible talks about Jerusalem will be a cup of trembling to the nations, and that God will bring all the nations against Jerusalem one day as an act of judgment. And all who come against her will be punished like terrible. And it's in Zechariah 12 or 14. It talks about how their eyes will rot out in their sockets, and all these things are going to happen to those who come against Jerusalem because it's a cup of trembling. So make sure you're on the right side of history and the right side of your prayers, because you don't want to be on that on the receiving end of God's judgment. So pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and we thank you for all the prayers today. God bless you.